We'll do sentence by sentence. But when the subject draws a little back. There you are, at 8 o'clock sharp. So we start reading. Today who will read? Oh, I have to read. Okay. So Sanki has started recording, so I'll start the rereading of this paragraph. But when the subject draws a little back from itself as object, then certain tertiary powers of spiritual knowledge, of knowledge by identity, take their first origin, which are the sources of our own normal modes of knowledge. So let's look very carefully at what you said. So when subject draws itself back from object, normally in the physical world, the subject and the object are always very, very different, and they are always separate. Okay? I am using a pen, I am quite separate from my pen. I am eating food, I am quite different from that. So when he is talking of this, he is talking of your own emotions. When you are having your emotions or your thoughts, you think that you identify yourself with the thought, okay, or the emotion. When you are, for instance, angry, then you become anger. That's it. If you are very careful, you will see that you have become anger. Okay, but is it possible to look at your anger as of standing back a little bit? That's what Srimad is talking about. Or your thought. You think that you are thinking, and the thought is yours. But actually, if you look, oh, this thought is passing through my mind. Is the thought correct or is it wrong? Okay, then you are standing a little back from the object. The object is the thought or the emotion, and the subject is yourself, your mental consciousness. Okay. Then, Srimad is saying, certain tertiary powers of spiritual knowledge, of knowledge by identity, take their first origin. Tertiary means threefold. Okay. Tertiary powers of spiritual knowledge, of knowledge by identity, take their first origin, which are the sources of our normal modes of knowledge. The normal mode of knowledge is the way we see things in the physical world. We are always separate from them. We are always separate from them. Not in our, we are separate not from when we are in the normal physical consciousness, the outside things, objects appear to be separate from us. But the power of non-identification with our own thoughts and emotions, they are not so normal. So, there is a spiritual intimate vision, a spiritual pervasive entry, and a penetration, and a spiritual feeling in which one sees all as oneself. So, he is talking of the 3 levels of consciousness that he has spoken about earlier. So, there's a spiritual vision. Okay? What is this vision? Spiritual intimate vision, many in the one. Intimate vision, many in the one. Okay, that's what you say. Then pervasive entry. Pervasive, very clearly, you pervade something. So your consciousness is pervading into everything. That is the one in the many. Okay? So these are the different types of knowledge that you can have. And penetration. Pervasive entry and penetration. Okay? Penetration, individual, okay, it goes. Feeling, okay, a spiritual feeling in which one sees all as oneself. This is the cosmic consciousness that is talking about. So these are the ways of experiencing knowledge. Okay? Knowledge, the 3 ways of knowledge. Feels all as oneself, contacts all as oneself. It is not only a feeling, but you can even contact them. In other words, you can contact the emotions of others, they become yours. And you can also the emotions and also thoughts of others. You can contact them. Contact means they become yours. Okay? So there is a power of spiritual perception of the object. Okay? There is a power of spiritual perception of the object, and all that it contains or is perceived in an enveloping and pervading identity. The identity itself constituting the perception. So what he's saying is here, there's a power of spiritual perception of the object. When you look at the object, okay, everything that it contains or is perceived in an enveloping and pervading identity. Enveloping all around and pervading going into it. So the knowledge by one in the many and the many in the one becomes very obvious. But what's he saying? He's saying that this power of spiritual perception. Suppose you are psychic, okay? And I always give this example to make it very clear. When someone is missing, for instance, there is a complaint to the police, okay? And the police, the family is called, and the police get hold of someone who is capable of this. They is called a psychic. A psychic is one who can look at something or touch something and understand all that is connected with it. That's what they say. Feels all, no, sorry. There's a power of spiritual perception of the object. So let us say the object is the clothes that the missing person was wearing. So this person comes who has got this power of spiritual perception, and he touches the clothes. Then all that it contains or is perceived in an enveloping and pervading identity. He can understand everything through the touch of that cloth he has contacted. He can know the person and all that is surrounding that clothing. If he wants from where it has come, who has given him, all these things also he can come to know. Enveloping and pervading identity, all around and inside. The identity itself constituting the perception. You have identified yourself with everything that the clothing represents. There is a spiritual conception that is the original substance of thought. There is a spiritual conception that is the original substance of thought. The original substance of thought is the mental substance that is there. And that's a spiritual conception. Not the thought that discovers the unknown, but that which brings out intrinsically known from oneself and places it in self-space. Okay? If the object is outside, it is let's read the sentence carefully again. There is a spiritual conception that is the original substance of thought, not the thought that discovers the unknown. Okay? Not the thought that discovers the unknown, which is our condition, but that which brings out intrinsically known from oneself and places it in self-space. Okay? You look at an object and you contact the consciousness of the object, and then it is now within yourself because of identity, and you know everything about it. In an extended being of self-awareness, as an object of conceptual self-knowledge. Okay? If I read the summary, it will be very clear. Okay? There, just one second. There, just one second. I have to cut this. Yeah. There is a spiritual emotion, a spiritual sense. There is an intermingling of oneness with oneness, of being with being, of consciousness with consciousness, of delight of being with delight of being. What he's saying is that this identification can be of substance, it can be of consciousness, it can be of delight, it can also be of the force, Shakti also. So, in other words, if that man has got a certain consciousness, you will be able to understand that consciousness. If the other person has delight, then you will also experience that delight. That's what it is. There is a joy of intimate separateness in identity. Now look at that. There is a joy of intimate separateness in identity. There is an identification and yet there is a separateness. In other words, love is possible. Okay? Love is possible with oneself because you are the thing being loved is within yourself. Okay? There is a joy of intimate separateness in identity, of relations of love joined with love in a supreme unity. A delight of the many powers, truths, beings of the eternal oneness, of the forms of the formless. All these type of things are possible. All the play of the becoming in the being founds its self-expression upon these powers of the consciousness of the spirit. So the power of the consciousness is describing the different types of knowledge that you can have. But in their spiritual origin, all these powers are essential, not instrumental. In other words, they are not something outside yourself, just like our mind is something which is given to us. But these powers that he is speaking about are inherent in you. They are to be explored and discovered. Not instrumental, not organized, devised or created. They are the luminous self-aware substance of the spiritual identical. Spiritual identical, the one, the highest one, made active on itself and in itself. Spirit made sight, spirit vibrant as feeling, spirit self-luminous as perception and conception. All is in fact the knowledge by identity, self-power, self-moving in its multitudinous cycle of one awareness. The spirit's infinite self-experience moves between sheer identity and a multiple identity, a delight of intimately differentiated oneness and an absorbed self-rapture. So this last sentence is saying that there can be knowledge by identity in many ways. First is sheer identity. You become the divine and nothing else. Okay? Nothing else. But there is another one, a multiple identity. That's a cosmic consciousness. You are one with everybody, but yet they are themselves. They are not you as yet. Okay? That is the multiple identity. A delight of intimately differentiated oneness and an absorbed self-rapture. So, words can sometimes confuse us. So what I'll do, I will read out the summary. Okay? Then I think it will be much clearer. I'm reading out the summary of what I said. Remember, to understand all this, you remember the 4 types of knowledge possible. That's why I gave it to you right in the beginning. Okay? So, the 4 types of knowledge. Knowledge by perfect identity at the highest level, knowledge by identity in a slightly diminished manner, a slightly less absolute, and the third one is in the intraconscious. You can have identity of everybody, but they are all still they are themselves. They are not you. Okay. So, and at the lowest level, there is you are using senses. So, if you want to go again, I keep repeating so that it becomes absolutely fixed in your mind. The lowest one is knowledge by indirect separating knowledge. I am seeing things outside myself, but I am using my senses. So therefore, if I am using my senses, sense is coming between me and the object. Therefore, it is indirect. And it is separated. I have to know that it is separate from me. But when you go into the intraconscious, that indirectness disappears because you are not using physical senses. So there is direct knowledge, but it is separated. You, if I am looking at you and I am in the intraconscious consciousness, then I will see your thoughts, but they are your thoughts. Okay, your emotions, but they are your emotions. So therefore, it is the second level, direct separated. And as you keep climbing higher and higher, even the separation disappears. And there also there are 2 grades. Sheer identity, absolute identity, you become what you want to know. And the second one is slightly less. There is a difference between object and subject, but still there is identity. So these are the four. Keep that in mind for this whole chapter. So I'm reading the summary of what we just now read. In this strangely separative oneness, when subject draws back from object, three powers of knowledge take birth without being separated. Three powers of knowledge, and we have seen that. First, spiritual intimate vision, that is the many in the one. All, everything, the whole cosmos is within you. And if something is there within you, you know it. So that is the first knowledge. Second, spiritual pervasive entry, the one in the many. Okay? One in the many. That's the cosmic consciousness again. Okay. Spiritual feeling in which the one sees all as oneself, as the one becoming the many. Okay. So there are the three ways, tertiary ways, and they use the word tertiary. The three ways of knowledge. Here, substance of consciousness, infinite and eternal, does not need to seek for knowledge. Outside itself, it knows and finds the subject within itself and places it in front so as to see and experience it. So this is what we do. This operation of subject being object within itself is repeated for substance, consciousness, power, and bliss. In other words, this way of knowing can apply to substance, it can apply to consciousness, it can apply to power as well as bliss. This triple way of knowledge, essentially, one becomes threefold in the normal waking consciousness of man in the physical world, but above it, in a single identity, in multiple identity. Single identity is possible and multiple identity also is possible. Multiple identity, you have understood, no? The cosmic consciousness. Everything is part of you, but they are all separate still. This is what Sri Aurobindo calls derivative knowledge by identity. It is the degraded and lessened knowledge by identity. In the next para, which we are going to have read, he describes knowledge by separative but direct knowledge. There is a third degree of knowledge viewed from the supreme heights. This is what he has said. Okay. So now we read the next para. A separative knowledge arises. Separative knowledge is at our level. How it arises, he is going to tell us. So somebody has to read.
I'm reading Gangata.
Okay, go ahead.
A separative knowledge arises when the sense of differentiation overpowers the sense of identity. The self still cognizes its identity with the object, but pushes to its extreme the play of intimate separateness. At first, there is not a sense of self and not self, but only of self and other self. A certain knowledge of identity and by that identity is still there, but it tends to be first overstructured, then submerged, then so replaced by knowledge through interchange and contact that it figures as a secondary awareness, as if it were a result and no longer the cause of the mutual contact. The still pervasive and enveloping touch, the interpenetrating intimacy of the separate selves. Finally, identity disappears behind the veil and there is the play of being with other beings. Consciousness and other consciousness, consciousness with other consciousness, and underlying identity is still there, but it is not experienced. Its place is taken by a direct seizing and penetrating contact, intermingling, interchange. It is by this interaction that a more or less intimate knowledge, mutual awareness, or awareness of the object remains possible. There is no feeling of self meeting self, but there is a mutuality. There is not yet an entire separateness, a complete otherness and ignorance. This is a diminished consciousness, but it retains some power of the original knowledge, curtailed by division, by the loss of its primal and essential completeness, operating by division, effecting closeness but not oneness. The power of inclusion of the object in the consciousness of an enveloping awareness and knowledge is there, but it is the inclusion of a now externalized existence which has to be made an element of herself by an attained or recovered knowledge, by a dwelling of consciousness upon the object, a concentration, a taking possession of it as part of the existence. The power of penetration is there, but it has no natural pervasiveness and does not lead to identity. It gathers what it can, takes what is thus acquired, and carries the contents of the object of knowledge to the subject. There can still be a direct and penetrating contact of consciousness with consciousness, creating a vivid and intimate knowledge, but it is confined to the points or to the extent of the content. There is still a direct sense, consciousness sight, consciousness feeling, which can see and feel what is within the object as well as its outside and surface. There is still a mutual penetration and interchange between being and being, between consciousness and consciousness, waves of thought, of feeling, of energy of all kinds, which may be a movement of sympathy and union, of opposition and struggle. There can be an attempt at unification by position of others or through one's own acceptance of position by other consciousness or other being. Or there can be a push towards union by reciprocal inclusion, pervasion, mutual position. Of all this action and interaction, the knower of direct contact is aware, and it is on this basis that he arranges his relations with the world around him. This is the origin of knowledge by direct contact of consciousness with its object, which is normal to our inner being, but foreign or only imperfectly known to our surface
nature. So this is the whole description of the third one from the top, or the second one from the bottom. Okay, he is describing how there can be identity, but there is a separateness also. It's very simple. I give you one example so that it's very, very clear. The girl who was standing in the queue going to mother, okay, she was about 7 or 8 people were ahead of her. 7 or 8 people were ahead of her. And she saw that mother is giving red roses. I have already given this example. It is very clear. Okay, so, and she thought in her mind that mother is not going to give me a red rose. She is giving red rose to everybody, but she may not give me a red rose. As soon as she comes to mother, mother says, oh, that's what you think? Here is a red rose for you. So what has mother done? She has understood, identified her mind with the mind of the child, and she has understood. So this is knowledge by identity, but separateness. That thought is not mother's thought, it is child's thought, and it is separate. But yet it is identity because she has been able to identify her not conscious thought with thought. But she is saying that this contact, direct contact, can be of thought, it can be of substance, it can be of consciousness, it can also be of power and also of delight. Okay. In other words, if that child was having delight, mother would have experienced her delight. If that child there was some, it cannot be a child anymore because power. Okay. There's a very interesting incident between mother and Anandamayi. I don't know if you people know about it, but Anandamayi was, I don't know if you have heard about it. She was a spiritual person and she was a guru to many. She had come to the ashram here. Okay. But her realization was not absolutely, there was a certain element of, you can say, egoism. Because when mother gave her a flower, okay, she returned that flower to mother. As though I mean, there's a lot of controversy on this subject, and many people comment on both sides. Not much commentary has been made from our side, from the ashram side, but from the other side, a lot of justification, a lot of comments. But the basic idea was, why are you giving me a flower? I'm the one to give you a flower. That sort of feeling. But at a very low level, because she was spiritual. So those who were watching saw that mother gave that flower to that Anandamayi Ma, and she returned that flower to mother. Mother took that flower and again gave it back to her. And this went on twice or thrice. Okay? Finally, mother, with her power, okay, her whole look changed, and with great force, she gave it back to her. Okay? Then what happened was very interesting. She said in Bengali, "Tu hi to amar ma, you are my mother." She recognized mother's great divinity. Okay? So this is an exchange of power. Okay? Now that's what Sridhar is saying. I've given you an example of thought. I've given an example of power. Okay? So there can be a thought, an identification with consciousness. It can be an identification even with substance. The substance, I've already told you one example I've given you, where the animal is being whipped by its owner because it was disobedient, and this yogi who is standing very far away, and he was in this cosmic consciousness or intra-conscious, and the whip marks came on his back. So this is substance. This is matter, subtle matter. Not even subtle, even gross matter. So this identification can take place with substance, it can take place with consciousness, it can take place with power and delight. That's what Sridhar is saying. Okay? So this is the intra-conscious. Normally when you go into the intra-conscious, this is what happens. Not super-conscious, intra-conscious. Okay? So now I'll read the summary and let us see. So I've given you many examples of what Sridhar is saying. Okay? So, one second. Yeah, I've got it. Okay, so the third type of knowledge. I told you, see, from the top, it is a third type. From the bottom, it's a second type. The third type of knowledge is direct separative knowledge. Your consciousness is contacting the consciousness of the other person. With the examples I have given, it should be very, very clear. Okay? The direct separative knowledge. When subject and object drift sufficiently apart so that the difference between the two is pronounced, okay, quite intense, the difference between the two, we have the third way of knowledge. Separative but direct. Subtle senses are used, but not the gross senses. Okay? Identity is still present, but it is first overcoated, then submerged, and finally replaced by separation. So, Sridhar's language is very interesting. Of course, this is not his language, but we'll see in his language. First of all, it is overcoated. That means the identity is hidden and the separation becomes more obvious. Then submerged. So first it is only coated, then it goes down little below the surface, and finally it is replaced by separation. At last, identity no longer exists and subject and object become separate. So, yet, direct penetration of object by subject takes place and contents of object are revealed to the subject. Intimate, this we discussed this just now. Okay? Yet direct penetration of object by subject takes place and contents of object are revealed to the subject. The subject is the psychic person, and she has gone to the police station and she is examining the cloth or let's say shirt used by the missing person. So that's an object. So the object, the shirt of that person who is missing, reveals everything about itself to the subject, to the psychic. Okay? Then the psychic knows what's what. And this is penetrative as well as enveloping. Everything connected, the circumstances connected with that shirt is revealed to the psychic. Okay, that's what it's saying. Yet, direct penetration of object by subject takes place and contents of object are revealed to the subject. Intimate oneness no longer exists, but a sense of mutuality, connectedness remains. Okay? Power of inclusion and penetration are present, but it is no longer within oneself. Object is now external to subject. This direct separative knowledge is a normal cognition of our subliminal being, the intraconscious, but almost unknown to the external nature of body-mind life. So this is what he's saying in the paragraph. Okay. I think the example should have helped to understand exactly what he's saying. Okay. So the time is 8:30. So we have got 10 minutes. So what would you like me to do? Shall we read the next para or shall we go through sentence by sentence? Because I have given you the gist of what he said. Okay. And it should be quite clear what he said.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, you can do that.
You know, these psychics which the police call,
Yes, tell me.
are they basically people who are spiritual or who've just got a gift like that from divine grace?
It's just a gift of nature normally. Because if they are spiritual, they will not very easily perhaps do this sort of thing. Normally, when the police call these people, they are people who have got this capacity. It can be both. A spiritual person certainly has that capacity, but it is possible for the person not to be spiritual and yet have this capacity. Just like someone is built tall, someone is built short. Nature has given you the capacity to be tall. Nature has given you, some people are born intelligent. Nature has given you the capacity of intelligence. Some people have given the power of emotion. Okay, some people can be very good musicians. So everybody can't be. So it depends on what nature has given you. So sometimes, in a freak way, nature gives you this power also. I give you one example of that famous Uri Geller. No? Uri Geller is a Jewish boy who can look at spoons and metal objects and bend them. He doesn't know how it has come. But it is nature has gifted him that, which is not a freak. Nature has just given that to them. That's how it is. So, but of course, a spiritual person can have this power. And they use it also. Okay? Of course, they use it. In fact, what Mother had said, when there were only about 30 people in the ashram, what she used to do every night, she used to, her body is resting, but her consciousness is to go out to each sadhak and identify herself, her consciousness with the conscious sadhak. And now that sadhak's problems are hers, and she solves the problem. Okay? So they are helped like anything. Mother is doing the sadhana for you. In fact, this is a sentence used very often. If you surrender to the divine, that applies even now, by the way. If you surrender to the divine does what is necessary for you in yourself. Okay? He does everything. Perfect surrender is like the baby cat. The baby cat doesn't worry about where the mother is going to take it. The mother just picks it up by the neck and takes it wherever it is, and very, very happily and surrenderingly, the baby cat goes with the mother. So this is what is being said. Okay. So then the other one is with effort. This is the image of Ramakrishna, the monkey baby and the baby cat. Surrender is like the baby cat. You surrender entirely to the mother, and wherever she takes you, she will do everything for you. But the monkey baby has to cling to the stomach of the monkey mother. Okay, so that is also a way that is the Jnana Yogis and they, with their own effort, they do that. That's not the path of surrender. So this is this is what can be done. So when mother is doing that, she is identifying herself with them, and it is their consciousness, but it becomes her consciousness by identity, and then she helps them. Then you may ask a question which is not related to the subject. Then why don't they benefit? So the answer is, how do we know they are not benefiting? Number one. Okay. Number two, even if they benefit, the power of habit comes back in the sadhak, and he sometimes regresses and falls back in spite of mother's help. Okay? That also can happen. The power of the past, the power of habit is very, very strong. The past always clings to one. It's not easy to get rid of the past. Okay. So, this is so. Your question, Jasmine, it is possible for nature to give you this freak power. In fact, Sri said that entering into the subliminal can be by training. It can also be by past life experiences and capacity, and it can also be a freak. Okay, it can also be a freak of nature. That also is possible. See, I gave you one example now. I told you very interesting. Okay. Sometimes it can come in a very brief moment. Okay. I told you once what happened in the press now. I was there with the manager, and it was at 10 o'clock. It was 9:30, 10 in the morning. And he suddenly called me. And the moment he called me, I knew what he wanted. And it was so striking because he didn't want a pen, or he didn't want me to call anybody, or he didn't want me to do some work in the press. No, he wanted ice cream. And that is why it was so striking. So at 10 o'clock in the morning in the office, everybody is busy doing work. Nobody wants ice cream at that time, but he wanted ice cream. And I immediately knew that. So for a freak second, okay, I could identify with this thought. So this is but it happened once again, but never again. So freak things can happen. Okay. So I think
Merci beaucoup.
okay. So this first separative ignorance we'll read next.
Thank you, Rangada.